Shalom, everyone. It is November the 29th, Parshat Mikketz. This is the first day of Hanukkah. Happy Hanukkah, everyone. We're glad to see you all. I think, Mani Sheldon, you're joining us from Memphis.
That's true. We are here in Memphis.
Okay, we have
Hi, you all.
a Memphis contingent and an Ottawa contingent and a New Rochelle contingency, and the rest of us, Highland Park, Edison. So great to see you all, and thank you for being part of today's class. Okay, um, I wanted to spend this class focusing on one scene in the story, but just to recap, and I'm just going to recap off the top of my head. So we have Joseph is in jail. Joseph is in jail because um, Potiphar's wife tried to seduce him, and in the plain telling of the story, Joseph resists her seductions, but in the not so plain telling of the story, uh, he has left his clothing in her hands and has ran outside, which gives you a voluptuous ambiguity in this story, exactly what happened. And another ambiguity that we don't really focus on is Potiphar himself, who places Joseph not in the deep dungeon. He doesn't execute him either, which is what you might expect someone to do under those circumstances. He basically puts him in a VIP dungeon. He puts him in the most prestigious dungeon that he can, where all the primary prisoners are placed. And this is a kind of signal to us that he kind of has his wife's number. He knows that she's a force to be reckoned with, and if you read the story closely, I think we can make a very good case that he knows exactly what kind of character she is, but he has no choice but to punish him. And so rather than execute him or, banish him completely, he puts him in a place that he will be useful. And this underscores a real important theme in the Joseph story and my colleague, Rabbi Kalmanovsky, last year pointed this out, and he said, he is so prodigiously talented, Joseph is, that there's an awareness of this talent that it should not be gone to waste. And so even in jail, there is something that he does, and that's how the last Parsha ends. And I think it goes to a truism, which is that a good person, a capable person, no matter what field they are in, is going to make a huge difference. Never let up the opportunity of finding an excellent person, no matter what they are. They can always transfer their excellent skills into a new set, and you never want to look past a great person. Okay, so Joseph is prodigiously talented, and so that his talent is for dreams. And in the beginning of our parsha, Pharaoh himself has a dream, and a set of dreams, the dream of the fat cows, the skinny cows, the fat sheaves, the skinny sheaves, and the Sar HaMashkim, the cupbearer, who is a very interesting minor character, says, I want to confess my sin. I was supposed to remember Joseph, but I didn't. I conveniently forgot him, in quotes, air quotes. And there was this Jewish kid, I'm saying, Hebrew lad with us in jail, and he was very successful in interpreting our dreams. Pharaoh, who is desperate for something that will be compelling, hauls up Joseph from the pit, and it's interesting how they just kind of erase the cupbearer from the stage. I always like to point that out because it shows dramatically how much disdain Pharaoh actually has for him. He has the cupbearer says what he has to say, and Pharaoh has no patience for him whatsoever, and he's gone from the stage. Joseph is hauled up, he's washed down, he's shaved down. Interesting, he's given a change of clothing. We all know that clothing is a very important motif in the entire set of stories with the coat, the ornamented tunic, the being naked in the pit, etc. And now, having been removed of prisoner's clothing, he is wearing more presentable clothing. And then, as he successfully interprets Pharaoh's dreams, Pharaoh has him given another change of clothing and also a wife, and he is, given a new name. And all of this is fitting Joseph very, very nicely. Um, we could explore this story altogether in terms of the theme of identity, running away from identity, and we've done a lot in the past on that. But I want to focus on how the story then turns to the delegation of the brothers. And I think that when Joseph encounters the brothers again, it's such a profoundly complicated, rich theatrical moment because of all the different scenarios that could unfold. He chooses the most difficult scenario, which is he chooses to be difficult to them. And the text relates that in an exquisite way, which we'll see. And then it focuses on their internal reaction and how that plays itself out. And what I want to do today is really put a magnifying glass on that reaction and show how in the reaction there's another story going on. And this has been a kind of theme this year, which is that we get one story on the surface, but there's another story not so deep below the surface that is readily accessible to us if we just kind of examine the text a little more deeply, the way the text wants us to examine it. And so, and the beauty of it is, I think we all, since we've read this so many times, we know it, we know this, but we haven't really been able to articulate it because we just haven't had the opportunity to really ask these questions. But I think it's once you see this, it just so self-evident that this is going, and that makes us understand the text. I've been saying over the last several times. There's a guy on YouTube. His name is Rick Beato, and he talks about music, and he asks the question, "What makes this song great? What makes this song great?" For my birthday, Kim got me his T-shirt here, Rick Beato, everything music, and and uh, uh, and she actually got him to send me a video saying happy birthday. I was like, wow, that's just so amazing. Okay, that was so nice. I was just really blown away by this. But the point is, he does to what I'm trying to do here is what he does in these videos. He tries to kind of tease out the musical information and show what's going on here. And I think that approach is so rich in terms of just, the text is saying to us things in a way that the information is right there. And only if we could just tease out this information, we get so much of a deeper appreciation of these texts. And that's what I want to do here. So without any further ado, let's go to the text. And here we go. I'm calling this Guilt and the Incarceration of Shimon. I'm just going to share it with you now. Here is the text. One second. Okay. Word. Let's try that. Here we go. So here's the story. And I'm taking it back all the way to the beginning of chapter 42. I'm going to do it in English first so that it kind of gets embedded in your heads. Okay, I wish I had a film for this, but this is a text, so we're gonna do this by text, and then I'm gonna do it in Hebrew, and then I'm gonna focus on the highlighted part very, very closely. When Jacob saw that there were food rations to be had in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you keep looking at one another? Now I hear," he went on, "that there are rations to be had in Egypt. Go down and procure rations for us there, that we may live and not die." So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to get grain rations in Egypt. For Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, since he feared that he might meet with disaster. Thus, the sons of Israel were among those who came to procure rations, for the famine extended to the land of Canaan. Now Joseph was the vizier of the land. It was he who dispensed rations to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed low to him with their faces to the ground. When Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, but he acted like a stranger toward them and spoke harshly to them. He asked them, "Where do you come from?" They said, "From the land of Canaan, to procure food." For though Joseph recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. Recalling the dreams that he had dreamed about them, Joseph said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see the land in its nakedness." But they said to him, "No, my lord, truly your servants have come to procure food. We are all of us sons of the same man. We are honest men. Your servants have never been spies." And he said to them, "No, you have come to see the land in its nakedness." And they replied, "We your servants were 12 brothers, sons of a certain man in the land of Canaan. The youngest, however, is now with our father, and one is no more." But Joseph said to them, "It is just as I have told you. You are spies. By this you shall be put to the test. Unless your youngest brother comes here by Pharaoh, you shall not depart from this place. Let one of you go and bring your brother, while the rest of you remain confined, that your words may be put to the test, whether there is truth in you. Else, by Pharaoh, you are nothing but spies." And he confined them in the guardhouse for 3 days. On the 3rd day, Joseph said to them, "Do this, and you shall live, for I am a God-fearing man. If you are honest men, let one of you brothers be held in your place of detention, while the rest of you go and take home rations for your starving households. But you must bring me your youngest brother, that your words may be verified, and that you may not die." And they did accordingly. They said to one another, "Alas, we are being punished on account of our brother, because we looked on at his anguish, yet paid no heed as he pleaded with us. That is why this distress has come upon us." Then Reuben spoke up and said to them, "Did I not tell you, do no wrong to the boy? But you paid no heed. Now comes the reckoning for his blood." They did not know that Joseph understood, for there was an interpreter between him and them. He turned away from them and wept. But he came back to them and spoke to them, and he took Simon from among them and had him bound before their eyes. Then Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain, return each one's money to his sack, and give them provisions for the journey. Okay, so I'm going to stop there before I read it in Hebrew. So you get the greatness of this scene. This scene is the brothers come, and Joseph recognizes them, and they don't recognize him. And what makes this story great is that this is a prime example of dramatic irony, right? Where the audience, that is us, the reader, the listener, we know things that the character doesn't know. And it's double irony because the audience knows something that one set of characters does not know, and another character knows something, the main character knows something that the other characters don't know. So Joseph knows them, they don't know him. That's dramatic irony 1. We know Joseph and the brothers, that's dramatic irony 2. And so dramatic irony is a driver of fiction or storytelling because it just amps up the tension in the whole story. And the more tension there is between the characters and the audience, the more there is a need for resolution, and the more satisfying it is for resolution at the end of the story. And I don't have to hide the spoiler here. You all know how the story ends, that the story ends when Joseph cannot restrain himself any longer. And what makes that so beautiful is that we also can't restrain ourselves anymore. We, the readers, the audience, the listener, we are taken by this. This is, the story, we're right there with him. And that's what makes this great. This what makes this great storytelling, is that the storyteller, in the masterful way that the storyteller is telling the story, is taking us along for the journey. And it's compelling precisely because it is told in such a way. It would be much more boring if we said, yeah, they went down, they got the, blah, 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 and Joseph revealed himself. We would never do as good a job. Okay. Or let me do it in Hebrew, because the Hebrew does pick up some deeper nuances. Okay. And you might recognize Vayar Yaakov, Jacob saw ki yesh shever b'Mitzrayim. Last year we talked about shever, meaning it's in multiple layers of meaning. Shever, brokenness, but shever, hope. So Jacob saw hope in Egypt, or he saw the brokenness, and it was. I urge you to review the lesson from last year. It's on our YouTube channel. Vayomer hine shamati, I have heard ki yesh shever b'Mitzrayim. So there's he saw, he heard. That's an interesting play. I have heard that there is food in Egypt. Redu shama. Redu is a very important code word for going down from the land of Israel. Shivru lanu misham. Little play on words. Acquire the food for us from there. Misham. Sham is another code word that is disparaging on Egypt. We have seen the word sham when Jacob speaks about the land of Egypt another time. And this is a stunning motif in the whole story, that we should live and not die. I just want to stop there for a second and say that it's so fascinating to us to see this phrase here, because on the one hand, Jacob is quite depressed about the loss of Joseph, and he's quite a broken man himself. And yet, even in all of his brokenness, he wants very much for everyone to live. And so, stepping back from the story as in the pastoral way that we rabbis read stories and try and get inspiration from it, I see a moment of inspiration here, that here, despite all of the darkness and the tremendous difficulty and challenge of living through a famine, more than anything else, he wants to live. And I ask, well, why is that? And it could be for a number of reasons, one of which is because he knows that there is a larger plan here. And so part of the therapy that is easy to access from the story is that when you know you have a larger plan, when you know your life story consists of something larger than yourself, you can actually try and put together a reason for living, right? And darkness and depression and all of the despair that people go through is difficult if that's all you see. If you're only and part of that condition is, I only see what's in front of it, and my life is not worth living, and it's too unbearable in the present context. What therapy does, and here the text is a beautiful example of this therapy, is to take you out of your own context and put you within the larger context. And it doesn't even have to tell us this. We all we need to do is remember, oh yeah, there's a promise going on here, and the promise is the covenant between God and the people. And so Jacob understands that his sons, as horrible as they are, despicable as they are the critical mass, the germ from which the people will emerge. So therefore, at the very least, that's the reason why we have to live. It's a huge reason. V'nichya v'lo namut. But it's also, life itself. And it takes a broken person to explain to people who are suffering that we have to go on. We have a reason to live. Okay? So they go down by your duache Yosef Asara. They're 10, and the Torah encodes for us a reminder that they are the brothers of Joseph, that they are 10, and that we, immediately make the calculation. Why are there 10? Well, Joseph is gone and Benjamin is the youngest, is still there. Now, we've read the rest of the story. We know that, but the 10 of them, it's just so obvious that we're coming, and I'm getting that in the next verse altogether. The 10 go down to get lishbor bar, little play on words, to acquire food that is grain in Egypt. Ve'et Binyamin, Benjamin, Achi Yosef, Joseph's brother, Lo Shalach Yaakov et Echav. Jacob does not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother. Benjamin has one designation here that reminds us that they're from the same mother. Ki amar pen yikra enu ason. He is afraid that Benjamin will experience some kind of danger there. Again, which just reminds us of the peculiar favoritism that Jacob has for the Rachel sons, and that the brothers seem to have accepted. Oh, that's our father's shtick. He loved Joseph, and obviously he's going to love Benjamin, but it never tells us that he gives Benjamin any kind of material favors other than protection, which is what caused all the harm in the first place to Joseph. Vayavo b'nei Israel, and then with classic biblical compression, the brothers end up in Egypt. Vayavo b'nei Israel lishbor b'toch haba'im. It's such a great sentence. The brothers come to get the food b'toch haba'im, among those who come. Yesterday for a little excursion, we went to Ellis Island, and I'm sure as you've been there, you go to the museum and you see, the hordes of people who are coming to the United States. And so this is exactly what's going on here. The people, the brothers are part of a mass migratory movement of people. I'm not going to say by the millions, but certainly by the many. Okay, they're within hordes of people who are coming to Egypt for one purpose only, and that is for food. Last year we explored this whole idea of migration. Why do people migrate? And they migrate for purely economic and sustenance reasons. When there was a famine, people migrate because they want to survive. Okay, so here is the brothers. They're coming to Egypt for food, and they are in this mass of people. B'toch haba'im ki haya harav be'eretz Canaan. The famine was in Canaan. And then nicely the narrator tells us, Joseph, hu hashalit al haaretz. He is the master. He is the ruler. He is the, however you want to describe the vizier, the exchequer. He is the minister in charge. He is the one who is hu hamashbir. He is, and this is the word shever again. He is the one dispensing all of the food to all of the people. Hu hamashbir l'chol ha'am ha'ar, l'chol am ha'aretz, to all the people. Vayavo achei Yosef, vayishtakavu lo apayim arza. And so they come to him and they bow down to him. They bow down to the ground. Of course, we remember the bowing down in the circumstance of wheat. I mean, this is a perfect recapitulation of the first dream. The 11 sheaves bowing down to his sheaf, and all of this is a kind of click in the mind of the reader. Vayar Yosef et Echav. Joseph sees his brothers, vayakirem. He recognized them, and when we are tuned to the nuances of the narrative, we know that hakara, recognition, is a key motif that is running all the way through the story, back even with Rachel and Isaac, etc. It doesn't recognize. The word haker, to recognize, plays very, very significantly in all the stories. And here the narrator is making just a little bit of a pun. Vayakirem, he recognizes them. Vayitnaker, he behaves to them cruelly or strangely, but it's more of the sense of cruel. So I like to say that between Vayakirem and Vayitnaker, it's like this. The text wants us to put a big, huge pause there whether it's, an instantaneous moment or whether it's a long moment, that's up to us as interpreters. But I want to ask, I've asked this question in reading it. What's the gap between his recognition and his decision to treat them this way? Okay, and why is it why is it that he makes that decision? Is it a decision that takes place in an instant, or is it a decision that takes place in the and that is a question of how you, as a director of the play, would direct this scene. Does he and it's an understanding of how people make these really consequential decisions. Do they make it in an instant, or do they take a moment? I don't know the answer to that, and I think both answers are plausible based on how we interpret this text. So, if we take the approach that he made this decision in an instant, that instantaneous decision may be as a result of having thought through this possibility already, or frankly, it may not. I don't want to spend too much time on it. I think it's a good subject for conversation over Shabbos lunch. So he behaves cruelly. Vayidaber itam kashot. He speaks harshly to them. Vayomer alehem. He says to them, Me'ayin bate. Where did you come from? Vayomru me'eretz Canaan lishbor ochel. We came from Canaan to get bread, to get food. Vayaker Yosef erechav. Again, it tells us he recognizes them. Ve'im lo ikiru. And that tells us that they don't only not recognize his sight, his face, but they don't recognize his voice. They don't recognize his body. Okay? By Yiskor Yosef, he remembers hachalomot, the dreams, asher chalam lahem, that he dreams. And then again, I would put a nice space in here too, to say, and so what? He remembers the dreams, and is he now relishing this? Is he enjoying this? Or is he angry? Is he exacting vengeance? Is he just playing with them? I don't know. It's a great, that's the dramatic, that's why it's such a great story. It's just telling us all these, it's leaving all these questions unanswered for us because we are engaged now. I want to be there on the floor with them and say, Joseph, what are you thinking? What are you doing? What are you saying? Right? So he is remembering the dreams, and depending on our portraiture of Joseph, we're saying either he is enjoying this or he is just trying to figure out how to make life miserable for them. And he does. Vayomer alehem miraglim atem, you are spies. Lirot et ervat haaretz. It's gross. It's a kind of grotesque thing that he says. You're here to see the nakedness of the land, and it's anatomical nakedness of the land. It's quite explicit, that term, and I would want to go down that rabbit hole of interpretation as to why he uses that term for the land and spying, and exactly what are they going to be spying? I mean, it's not as if Canaan is going to attack Egypt. Egypt is a superpower here, so the best thing I can come up with, without going into this too deeply, is that he is saying you are agents spying and reporting because we know you're little puny Canaanites, but you're reporting to the other great superpower of the day, which is in Babylonia. You're the Babylonian Empire. Okay, that's the best I can do, but I don't want to go there. Okay. No, they say to him, no, Adoni, lo, Adoni, no, my master, we just want to eat. And then they spill the beans. Kulanu b'nei ish echad nachdu. We're the son of one man, ish echad. Like ish echad. And the translation made it out to be like some Joe in Canaan. But he's like Jacob, Kenim anachnu. This is the ultimate irony, right? We're truthful people, right? And we know how much they lie, right? And this is, again, the narrator is just kind of squeezing us for every cent. We speak the truth, man, and he's just kind of eating this up. Lo, you avodecha meraglim. We're not spies. Your servants are not spies. No. He says, no. Again, this term, you came to see the nakedness of the land. And they answer, more information. 12 servants, Achim anachnu, we are brothers. B'nei ish echad be'eretz Canaan. We're the son of one man in Canaan. V'hinei hakaton et avinu hayom. And this is important information that Joseph now has to decode. The little one is with our father today, so he gets two pieces of information, that his brother, fine, his father, still alive. V'echad einenu. And the other, we don't know where he is. Einenu means he's gone, but it doesn't mean he's dead. It means he's lost. And this is conveying to Joseph everything that he needs to know. He's saying, the brothers are saying, we didn't kill him. The brothers are saying he's gone. But right now, the brothers obviously are not saying we're responsible for that. They're just saying passively, he's gone. Vayomer aleim Yosef, Joseph says to them, U asher dibarti alechem lemor meraglim atem. This is what I'm saying. You're spies. I'll verify this. Bezot tibachenu. You will be verified by this, by the life of Pharaoh. Okay, and here he's milking this for every moment, because that's how an Egyptian talks. You swear by the life of Pharaoh. Im tetzu mizeh, by the life of Pharaoh. If you ever get out of here, you got to bring your little brother down. Send one delegate back. Interesting, because Joseph himself was a solitary traveler. Okay, so detach one of you from the group and go back. Okay, as a kind of reminder of what I did, but they don't get it yet. V'ikach et achichem, bring your brother, and you will stay in prison, and we'll see how verified your words are. If truth is with you, right? And if not, by the life of Pharaoh, you are spies. Miraglim atem. Vayasof otam al mishmar shloshet yamim. He puts them in jail for 3 days. Now, it's very interesting. We could go into 3 days. 3 days is another important motif in the Torah and in the Bible altogether. And he puts them in jail. But during the time that he's in jail, he's got to be thinking through his own strategy here. And he's got to be saying, is it better if I send one back or all of them back? So then he says, Vayomer alehem Yosef, on the 3rd day, Bayom HaShishi, Zot asu v'chyu. This you do so you can live. Et Elohim ani yoreh. God I am afraid of. Okay, I revere God, which is, they should have picked up on this, but they didn't. Okay, he's handing them a little bit of a kind of clue that I have a certain relationship. It's odd that an Egyptian would be fearful of God, because the Egyptian is more fearful of Pharaoh. So very strange. It's a kind of signal or a probe that he is sending to them that they're missing. Okay? In kinimatem, if you are so truthful, achichem echad yaser beveit mishmarchem, you'll leave one of you here. V'atem lechu aviyu, you go and bring back, and you'll bring back this food to your household. So he is conscious of the fact that if he keeps all of them in jail, his father won't eat, and they're going to die. And to bring to send one brother back is not going to be enough. So he sends them back. He decides to let them all go and keep one hostage, and that's collateral for the younger brother, so that they can have food and they can bring back a lot of food. You'll bring your little brother down. And we'll see that if you're what you say will come true, velo tamutu, so that you won't die. Because if you don't do it, you're going to die. You're going to die one way without food, or you're going to die another way if you don't tell the truth. So he's got them really locked up, okay, in more ways than one. And now I've highlighted this because this is the critical moment. Vayomru ish al achiv, the brothers say to each other, And note the staging here, and we'll talk about this. Aval Hashemim anachnu al achinu. We're guilty. We're guilty for our brother. Asher ra'inu tzarat nafsho. We saw his anguish. Behit chanano eleinu. When he supplicated before us. Velo shamanu. We didn't hear. Al kain. Ba eleinu hatzara hazot. That's why all of this torment is coming to us. And now, this moment is just amazing. Vayan Ruven otam lemor, and Reuven then says to them, answers them, Halo amarti alechem lemor. Didn't I tell you, saying, Al techetu vayaled. Do not sin by the boy. Velo shematem. And you did not hear. V'gam damo yinei nidrash. And I'm doing this for a reason which will be obvious later, which is, and now they're asking for his blood. And here, the critical, dramatic moment. Behem lo yadu. The brothers didn't know. Ki shomei Yosef. That Joseph was listening. Ki amelitz binotam. And I like to point out these 3-word little phrases. They punch out the narrative in a way that says, listen, listen, listen. Okay? They didn't know that Joseph was listening. The interpreter was between them. So you have in your mind now a stage that Joseph is on one side, an interpreter is in between them, 10 men are on the other side, and that there's outside of the room, there's lots of noise because there's lots of people, and that this is some kind of royal dispensary. It's a magical scene. And here then, Vayasov me'alehem vayeth, another 3-word phrase. He turns about and he cries. Vayashav alehem, he turns to them. Vayidaber alehem, speaks to them. Vayikach meitam et Shimon, he takes Shimon from them, and Vayasor oto leinem, and he ties him up, or he binds him up, or he locks him up in front of them. Okay. And then he tells them, he has his people fill up the sacks and return their money to them, which becomes, of course, an important theme. And they gives them food for the road, sedala derech, vayaslam ken. And this again, I can't help but comment on the Jewishness of this because he's a Jewish brother, right? It's like, here, I'm going to give you food for the way, okay? And I would comment on this that anybody who's ever gone on a trip, right? And my mother is here to tell you this, to corroborate this, right? Before you set out, you are, as a Jewish child, you are given, food for a week, okay? Right? That's what's going on here. But of course, it may not only be Jews. All right. So my analysis. This amazing staging. You can see why the story is so lent to dramatization. Aval Hashemim anachnu al achinu. We are guilty about our brother. And here I want to say, wow, this is just amazing. The fact that they say this conveys so much information between the lines. And what is that information? Terrible things are happening to them. It is the most natural tendency that people have when they experience terrible things to try and explain them. So the brothers are going through a moment in which they're trying to rationalize the experience that they are having based on their own sense of accumulated guilt. Why is this happening? Why do I deserve this? It's human self-understanding that things take place for a reason. And I would say on to the contrary, one of the worst situations is recognizing that there is no reason for things. And that's, by the way, just parenthetically, why people have conspiracy theories. We want palpable explanation, readily understandable reasons for random chaotic events. So, for example, in the most, grotesque way possible, you say, why did the earthquake happen? Why did the famine happen? Why did the pandemic happen? Why are the wildfires happening? And you see that every society, every system of thinking is trying to construct a set of reasons for events that essentially are so complicated or so multifaceted in their origins, right? And But that's a human need. It's a human need to explain. And you see it in the most grotesque way, in the most grotesque conspiracies. In the Bible, it's slightly different, and I'll explain that in a second. But I, just want to take, as an example, the Kennedy assassination. Why is it still compelling to people to still think of conspiracy theories regarding the Kennedy assassination? Because the answer is they can't imagine that a patsy would take down the most powerful person on earth without any sort of reasoning behind it. They can't accept the simplest explanation that Oswald acted alone, right? That it had to be more complicated because things like that don't happen. And that's the human tendency is to try and explain traumatic, chaotic events with logic. And sometimes the logic doesn't apply. And that's why you need to create another logic. And in the most grotesque manifestation of that, you have the inability to accept basic truths, right? And the weaving of radical or very complicated conspiracy theories to do that. And of course, we see that in spades in front of our own eyes, and the tendency to capitalize on that kind of thinking that is readily available. And I don't need to go into it. You obviously understand what I'm talking about. But the Bible has that as a core tenet, which is things happen for a reason. And in this story itself, that's going to be a central theme because, as we will see next week, Joseph regards the meaning of the events as God directed. God has directed all of this. God is responsible for the whole story here. And that is that this moment takes place within a larger moment, which takes place within an even larger moment. And all of that is ordained by God. And to see the strings connected to God is the art of the biblical narrative. The moment, so God, but the irony here is that right now, God is not doing this, Joseph is doing this. All right. Now I want to say that this moment where they say, Ashemim anachnu, we are guilty, signifies the awakening of their moral conscience. In fact, their moral conscience may have been awakened earlier, but this is the first time that it is being expressed. So I want to ask, let's put this on the calendar. How many years have transpired? Joseph was 17 when he was abducted and sold. He was 30 when he was elevated to Pharaoh's court. So we have 7 years of plenty that follow. We discover later that he reveals himself that they have had are 2 years into the famine. So the first encounter is when Joseph is 38 or 39 years old. So 17 to 13 years, okay? And then 7 years of plenty is another, it makes it 20. And that this might be the first year because they go back and forth twice. So I'm going to allow a few months between each journey. So it may be this is now the first year or the second. He finally reveals himself in the second year of the famine, which would make him 39. This could be in his 38th year. And for me, it makes it nice and convenient that it would be 21 years. I like the groupings of 7. So that 3 times 7 years have gone by of Joseph being away. And that is a lot of time to sit on your guilt. Okay? And in that period of time, 21 years, look, a new generation has gone forth. The brothers are now fathers themselves. We don't know that, but we know that by the time they get down to Egypt in a couple of chapters from now, the whole clan is going to be 70 people. It's like, how many people are at Jacob's Seder? There are going to be 70 people at Jacob's Seder. That's because the 12 brothers all have, it doesn't tell us about their wives, but they certainly have children, and that they number 70 coming down to Egypt. Okay, so that means that they have all experienced a transition, and they are all being elevated into a primary status. In the last 21 years, it's a generation, And that is not an accident, okay? So, how is the story changing their mind? This, to me, is a really important question, because what they are saying is different from what the Torah experienced or the Torah related back in last week's Parsha. Ashera'inu nafsarat nafsho. We saw his anguish. When he beseeched us and we didn't listen. And that's why all of this is coming. How is the story changed? Here's the original story. They saw him from afar, and before he came close to them, they conspired to kill him. They said to one another, here comes that dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits, and we can say a savage beast devoured him. We shall see what becomes of his dream. But when Reuben heard it, he tried to save him from them. He said, let us not take his life. And Reuben went on, shed no blood, cast him into that pit, out into the wilderness, but do not touch him yourselves, intending to save him from them and restore him to the father. When Joseph came up to the brothers, they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the ornamented tunic, and took him and cast him into the pit. The pit was empty, no water. They sat down to a meal. Looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilad, laden with bearing gum, balm, laudanum, to Egypt. Judah said to his brother, what are we gaining by killing our brother and covering him with blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let us not do away with him ourselves. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh. His brothers agreed. When the Midianite traders passed by, they pulled Joseph out of the pit. They sold Joseph for 20 pieces of silver. The Ishmaelites who brought them to Egypt. Reuben returned to the pit, tore his clothes. He said, the boy is gone. What am I to do? They took Joseph's tunic. They dipped it in blood, etc., and they brought it back to their father. We don't have time to go into that deeply. Okay. And here in the Hebrew, the critical verses, Vayehi ka'asher ba Yosef el achav, when Joseph came, Vayafshitu et Yosef et kutanto, they strip him. Vayikachu, they take him. Vayashlichu, they throw him into the pit. Vayishvu lecho, they sit down to a meal. Vayisu einehem, they see the Ishmaelites. Then, Vayomer Yehuda alachav, Judah said, let's sell him. After all, he's our brother. And then the brothers listen. Vayishmeu echav, and then the Midianites take him up. The sale takes place. Did the brothers sell him or did the Midianites sell him? We don't know. It's a nice whole vein of commentary. Reuben returns to the pit. Reuben tears his clothing. Okay, and I know we have a hand up here. Barbara, go ahead.
Stephen, what is the significance of him keeping Shimon? Because I thought Shimon had something to do with.
That's my punchline for the class. Hold on to that question. Okay, we'll get there. Okay, so in the original story, does Joseph say anything? Did Joseph do anything? What did they see? The text tells us nothing. But what this is saying, in 21 years later, is not only is the victim traumatized by the victimization, that is Joseph in the story. To think of what he must have gone through, he is traumatized, but the victimizer is traumatized by the guilt of his victimization. We don't have time to look at the last clip of the movie Atonement. For your homework, I would suggest watching the movie. The movie Atonement is all about, it's such an important, beautiful movie about how a sister who is jealous of her sister who had a lover, because of her jealousy of her sister, framed the brother, accused him of rape, and he had to, because of that, enlist, and he died in the escape from Dunkirk. Okay, if you haven't seen the movie Atonement, it's all about how people live for decades with their guilt, and only then need to experience a kind of atonement for their guilt. And I'll leave it to you to decide whether or not she's successful. I'll give you my take on it. The guilty character is played by Vanessa Redgrave, and we can't stand Vanessa Redgrave. She's a big anti-Semite, so I don't think she's able to work out her guilt. I think she's a loathsome person, and she plays a loathsome character. And for me, the film doesn't resolve the atonement. Okay, Reuben answered. This is what I love. Didn't I tell you? and he says, "Halo amarti alechem lemor." All right, he's saying it in such grandeur, right? Because the Torah is self-aware of how the Torah speaks, right? Later on in the Torah, it's God speaks to Moses, saying, right? That kind of language, I say to you, saying, is that's reserved for God. It's reserved for Moses. Reuben, who the hell do you think you are using that kind? Hello, amarti lechem lemor. I'm quoting myself. Didn't I tell you? Al techetu bayaled velo shamata. I sold, and here he's using very lofty language. Thou shalt not sin by the child. Velo shamatem. And you didn't hear me. You didn't hear me because I'm the God of your family. I'm the leader. I'm the moral backbone, the spine of this family. Right? And they think he's kind of like he's a fraud. I'm saying, what pomposity. What is he trying to do here? Who talks like this? And what is the Torah trying to say about it? So I'm saying this is a kind of, I got a little bit of an axe to grind here because I find fraud very, very ugly. And I find no uglier fraud than pious fraud, okay? When people who present themselves as very pious, but themselves are loathsome individuals. To me, that's the worst. It's just like, we have no patience for people masquerading as pious when they're just loathsome. And the reason why he's loathsome is because what does he say in this actual story? Does he say, "Thou shalt not sin by the lad"? Here's what really happened. He says, "Vayishma lo nakenu nafesh." Okay, we won't hit him. We won't hit him. And he says to them, "Al tishpichu dam." Don't shed blood. Okay, very, very nice. Don't spill blood. Hashlichu oto al habor hazeh. Let's throw him into the pit. Biyad al tishlichu bo, and let not your hand touch him. Leman natzil oto mi'adam, so that we can save and send him back. Wait a minute. And I'm saying, wait a minute here, which is like, that's don't sin. That's pious. That makes you righteous. All you did was put him in a, you stopped the brothers from killing him by putting him in a pit, by inflicting on him more torture than was necessary. If you had any kind of spine, you would have stood up for him and put your own life on the line. You would have said, "You want a piece of him? You got to have a piece of me," right? That's what a hero does. But here he's a canard. He's a charlatan. He's saying, "Don't touch him. Here, instead, we'll put him in jail. We'll put him in the pit. We'll let him suffer a bit so that you can be satisfied," right? And that is a sadist person. Okay, you tell I see your hand up. You gotta go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess it troubles me all the time. Where is Reuben when they're all eating that he doesn't know what's going on?
Yeah.
What's happening? Is he always separated and alienated from his brothers, which would make it sense that they don't have any respect?
Okay, so I'm giving you my 2 cents on this in 2 seconds, which is my portraiture of Reuben is the pious fraud. Okay, and the reason why he does this is because he has his own atoning to do also. In the moment that is glossed over by everyone from the last 2 weeks ago is that he usurps his father's bed by sleeping with his father's wife. Okay, that's a bad thing. Okay, to sleep with your father's wife, that's bad. All right, so he has to present himself in some way as above the others morally, but there's no way to do that. Okay, and so here he is the firstborn of the family, which has given him a natural position of leadership, but he's clearly not made of the right stuff. My take on why he goes out away from them is he's behaving like a pious person. He wants to separate himself from the rest of the brothers. The brothers are loathsome in his eyes, but only someone who has a sense of self-righteousness sees others as loathsome, and therefore he needs to go off. The commentators pick up on this and they say that he's doing tshuva, blah, 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 and all sorts of things. And they're picking up on the sense of pious sentimentality here, that he's acting in a way that is grandeur and pompous. And they don't have any patience for that nonsense. Okay? Go on here. They didn't know. They didn't know that Joseph was listening because the angel was. This is, again, stunning in terms of theatricalization, right? That we have the irony of ironies, right? We, this moment kind of compresses three separate dramatic ironies together. One is Joseph knows something that the brothers don't know. Two, the interpreter doesn't know something. And three, the audience, we know everything, okay? We know that Joseph speaks Hebrew. We know that the interpreter is a pawn. We know that the brothers don't know everything. And so we have the height of dramatic tension here, okay? So he turns, he cries, he speaks, he returns, he speaks, he takes Shimon. Now, back to Stephen's question. Why Shimon? Shimon, go ahead, Alana, go ahead.
He, according to the commentaries, he was the one who put personally Yosef into the pit.
Okay, so I love that comment, and I love the fact that the rabbinic tradition says that comment, because they identify Shimon as the most cruel of the brothers. And the reason why they identify Shimon as the most cruel of the brothers is because Shimon, together with Levi, perpetrated the massacre on Shechem. So it begs the question, why doesn't he just put Levi in there also? So for some reason, Levi gets separated. So the commentaries, while offering a plausible reason, and I agree with this reason, it doesn't satisfy me 100%. Satisfy 90%. I'm 95% satisfied by that, but not 100. Here's what gives me the next 5%. When Shimon is born, what does Leah say? Vatar od v'tered ben, that's Leah having the baby. Vatomer, she says, Ki shama Adonai, ki snu'a anochi. The Lord has heard that I am hated. Shama, Shimon, right? That's the play on the name Shimon. His name, encoded in his name, is the sense my mother was hated, right? Every time he says his name, he has to understand that I have been named Shimon because my mother was the hated woman. Snu'a anochi, vayiten li gam et zeh, and God has given me this child, vatikra shmo Shimon. So I want to say, how do you burden your child with that kind of name, right? To have such a negative connotation. So this child then, to me, this is what I would do on the psychology here. The child grows up knowing that his very name is symbolic of the hatred, the snu'ah. The mother is hated, okay? The child grows up knowing his name. The child, when he's aware, is saying, well, why am I named Shimon, right? We would all say, who am I named after? And they would say, well, I'm named after your great-grandfather, blah, 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 who was a wonderful guy, right? Nobody wants to name someone after someone who is a terrible person. And so he says, well, Mommy, what does my name mean? And she says, you were named because of the fact that my husband hates me and loves her, okay? And you are the child of his, of that, okay? Live with that, all right? So his whole life, he grows up thinking like, my father hates my mother, and that's why I'm born, and I am the reflection of the enmity. And you know what? It doesn't surprise me in the least that he would behave cruelly to other people, because he has internalized a whole sense of cruelty and ugliness that exists within the family. But it goes further, because Joseph is, I'm going to say, Joseph is not being kind here, okay? Joseph is playing a cruel joke on all of them by saying, because he's saying, look, that was the reason she conceived again bore a son. I was hated. You are the embodiment of the redemption from being hated. Just as you presented our father's hatred for your mother, you will represent my brother's hatred of me. I'm trying to say that that's what Joseph is saying under the line, which is he's saying, you are the perfect person to put in jail because you represent hate. you're the hate of our family. And so you want to see hate? You guys hated me. I'm going to make you the personification of hate. And because of that, I'm going to put you in jail. And so you're going to stew on this for the duration of time that the brothers are away. The conciliatory reading is, it's not his fault, Shimon. It's not his fault that he was put into that place, right? So at the end of the day, we're going to have compassion for all of the brothers because it's not their fault altogether. What Joseph does, and here, I don't want to be cynical in the way I read the end of the story. The end of the story tries to make a reconciliation between Joseph and his brothers. Of course, I'm not spoiling it for you. You know this, right? And what happens at the end is that compassion has to rule and has to be victorious over the enmity, the desire for vengeance. And because Joseph can't sustain his own life if he keeps enmity between him and his brothers. And that's really where the whole story is going to lead. But you see in this moment, and this is why this is such a precious, great moment, it's such what makes the Torah great, as Rick Beato would say. What makes the Torah great is that compressed within 2 sentences, you have a whole story here. You have a whole story of relationships. You have a story of guilt and atonement and how guilt festers in a life for 20 years, 21 years. They're living with this. And it erupts in a moment that they never expected in their whole lives, right? But it's simmering with them. And I suspect, and this is like the sermon here, the sermon is if you live with guilt, it's going to simmer in your whole life. That's why I always like to say when it comes to Yom Kippur, you think, this is the joke that exists in Yom Kippur. You think you're atoning for everything you did last year. No. You're atoning for things you did decades ago. If you live a long life, there are things that you can never atone for, right? And you can never get closure on, okay? And so you have to revisit them all the time in order to live with yourself, in order to be able to endure. That's the genius of it. That's the beauty of it. You just, we make a mythology out of Yom Kippur that, you got a clean slate. There's no such thing as a clean slate. There's just the ability to cope with your life. That's what it does. And having those rituals and having a day of forgiveness and a day where you approach that gives you the spiritual energy to cope with your life. Otherwise, it's a mirage. And therefore you don't take it seriously. If I want Yom Kippur to be taken seriously, I want to know that it's an ongoing process because my life is an ongoing process. Similarly, here in the story, they've done a terrible thing, okay? They've done a terrible thing in which the very life of their brother they truly don't know if he's still alive. They think he is gone. They wish that they know that he has been sold, but they don't know what became of him, which in itself is something that they can be guilty for because they never go to look for him. Nobody goes to look for him, which makes him feel even that much more abandoned. And I think that to me is one of the tragic elements of the whole story, which is that this family is so dysfunctional that they don't do what any normal family would do, which is you're lost. I mean, I see this in Israel all the time, where someone is abducted or someone is, in captivity and God. I mean, they turn the world upside down to get their kid back, okay? That's what a normal family does, right? You want, your kid is alive, and even if the kid is dead, at least you want the body, right? We hear this, it's an important element of the self-understanding of what it means to be a Jew and a Jewish state. We will not leave anyone behind, okay? And here they leave him behind. It's just awful, okay? And so in the midst of all of this awfulness, they have this terrible, terrible guilt, which they have reconstructed in their minds in a way that you've seen. They tell the story now differently. And this is another illustration of how over time your memory of events change, and you tell the story that you want to tell rather than the story that happened. Right? Genesis 37 is the video of the event. Genesis 42 is their telling of the story. And what is so amazing is that the way they retell the story is different from the video. And that is true in life. You see it played out in courtrooms across, everywhere. When you have video, it's how you interpret it, how you remember it, that really matters. Now, the commentators do a nice trick of trying to harmonize the way that the text tells the story and the way that the brothers tell the story. They do a wonderful job of trying to harmonize that, and I think what they say is, look, the Torah is so economical. It's not going to tell us what happened. It's not going to tell us that Joseph was screaming. What use of that is saying? We'll learn that Joseph was screaming by what the brothers say later on. But that only gives me partial satisfaction. What gives me total satisfaction is a much deeper and more nuanced reading of this that tells us exactly what every single one of us knows, which is, if you're going to recount a traumatic or important or fateful event in your lives, it might actually be different from the video, right? And because that's what memory is. And that's what happened here because of their terrible, terrible guilt. The terrible guilt made them emerge the way they do, and it will be pushed to the limit as Joseph gets them to finally, repent of that. Judah will do that in next week. We'll see that, and it emerges also in the most extreme way. And I would use Reuben as an example, and here we'll have to end with this, which is that piety is the answer to guilt, okay, except for when it's a fraud, okay? When piety is honest and true, it does work, okay? When people are earnest in their piety and tear their clothes and cry and weep and fast and do all of that, and they try to really, really change themselves. But when it's dressed up in pompous language and pompous gestures and pompous airs of authority, it's empty, okay? And I think that I read a lot into the character of Reuben because he's a convenient troll or canard for us to show us the caricature of the pious personality. And the only reason why I'm sensitive to it is because we happen to live around that, not infrequently we might see that. And understand that there has to be a kind of earnestness and honesty and truthfulness in the way the pious comport themselves. That the deeds and the piety have to match the authenticity of the desire for atonement. Go ahead, Ilana.
No,
Oh, you're just stretching.
I was just thinking before, לא תעמוד על דם רעך.
Yes. Do not stand idly by the blood of your brother, okay? Which would have been the pious thing to do. And the real truth is, the pious don't need to play pious. They do. They do the right thing without anybody having to tell them, okay? And that's why I see Reuben as a fraud, because if Reuben was truly pious, he wouldn't need the recognition from his brothers. He wouldn't speak this way. And he was said, and this whole story would be over. He would said exactly what I said, which is, you want a piece of him, you got to have a piece of me. You got to take a piece of me, right? And really, really talk to them that way. To get to him, you got to go through me, and I will fight you to the death, right? So stop it, right? That's what he's saying here. Go ahead, Marley.
Well, if he weren't that kind of a person, maybe he would have come clean all these 21 years with his father and his brothers back home.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's another piece of evidence here. The fact that he doesn't go the distance and say to his father, this is what happened, is just another illustration. I mean, it's this, it's the most accessible illustration of his fraudulence, which is that, if he was so pious, he would have fessed up to his father, on day one or day two, or a week later. Go ahead, Marlene.
And yet we use them as the paradigms for our mishpachot when we all take our family flags and we say what tribe we're from, and we use those as the Bnei Yisrael.
Look, okay, so this is what makes the Bible, and this is what makes Judaism, Judaism. The Bible is the Bible because the Bible wants you to see them for what they are. Judaism has another set of agenda items, and that is, there's a strong effort, as you all know, of kind of sanitizing and sanctifying these individuals. Perhaps the message of that is, even the most loathsome of creatures can become, can become.
Yes, come up.
Even the most loathsome of individuals can become quite significant. Okay, I think that's a very powerful teaching, and it runs in deeply in the main tributary of Judaism, that everybody has the possibility of going from loathsome to saintly. Okay, so that's part of it. The other part of it is simply, we want, everybody else despises us. Why should we despise our ancestors? And I think it feels a spiritual need of having people to venerate. Yes. Okay. Well, you can see then what makes the Torah great. These beautiful, amazing sentences where there's just a story within a story within a story. And now that we have that, we can really appreciate what's going on here. So with that, we will let it go. Anybody?